folks. We're getting ready to start presentation number 2. This is my presentation. If any of you don't know me, my name is Rene LaVoise. I'm the Vice President of the Missouri Pacific Historic Society. Hope you all enjoyed the train trip in the Museum of Transportation this morning. A lot of work putting this together, but it's paying off with everyone enjoying it, so that's good. So let's, everyone's ready, we'll go ahead and get this thing started tonight. So this is the 200th anniversary of the state of Missouri. So we're just going to look at the first 25 years of development of the rail systems in the state. I can commensurate with a lot of what Jim was saying in his presentation. Researching this stuff can be very difficult. Name changes of railroads, dates are wrong, 2 different sources that don't correspond with each other, and then you find hints about something but can never find anything to back it up. And it's like, well, do I keep that? Do I ignore it? What do I do with it? So what this presentation tonight is not going to cover, like the financial wheeling and dealings of the railroads or the market downturns, the recessions, stuff like that. And we're not going to get into the biographical of the folks that were backing the railroads. I mean, just whole stories you can do around that stuff. This is just kind of going to be, let's just walk through and watch how the railroad systems developed. So we'll look at just the progression of the railroads. We went from 5 miles in 1852 when the Mopac built west out of here, just out here in this valley, from here out to Cheltenham. You saw in Dave's presentation yesterday, it's 5 miles west of downtown, to a little over 3,200 miles by 1876. So for those not familiar with Missouri, here's where some of the major locations are. St. Louis, Hannibal up north, St. Joseph on the west, Kansas City, Jefferson City. Why am I telling you? You can read this. Why am I reading it to you? And Moberly. Okay. Oh yeah, Chillicothe. I forgot about that one. Because I gave this presentation to a bunch of modelers a couple of weeks ago just to check the timing and everything on it, and I didn't have a slide in here like this, and they were not familiar with Missouri, so they had no clue of what I was referring to sometimes. So I thought this would help. So we'll start a little bit of history. 1803, Louisiana Purchase. You know, that was a great thing. We got that from France. That's the whole start of it. St. Louis has already kind of existed by then. It had been here since the 1600s as a fur trading. 1821, we'll jump ahead, became the 24th state, so this is the 200th anniversary of the state. It was seen as being the colonizer of the far west. This was the jumping off point for a lot of western frontier travel. And St. Louis had long been a hub of commerce in the region. All the fur traders, the French, the Spanish were all here. That blue line is what was considered the western frontier of the United States at that time. Everything west of that was considered open frontier land. So early transportation in Missouri was all river-based, because we have the Missouri River, got and the Missouri River, or the Mississippi River running the whole eastern boundary. And St. Joseph and Kansas City were vying for business for the Western Territories. Neither one was predominant. Both were jumping off points for wagon trains and that going west. People going west would come into St. Louis and then riverboat up to KC or St. Joe and catch a train going west, or a wagon train going west. Not our type of train. So there's the trade routes that went west. You had the Santa Fe Trail going out down to New Mexico, New Oregon Trail, and the California trails. But you know, why a need for railroads in Missouri? We had river-based commerce. You know, there were a lot of people that had their fortunes in riverboats did not want to see railroads. They thought it was a competition. And you know, St. Louis definitely did not want railroads because it was heavily tied to the rivers. And there was a small population in the state. I forget the figure, it was like over 85% of the population of the state at that time lived within 10 miles of a river. But in 1836, some thoughts changed, and they started, hey, maybe we need to get this railroad thing. So, because we had a decline on the Santa Fe trade route, that started drying up. There's this little city north of here that I think is part of the name of the BRHS. The Chicago is becoming a commercial center, and St. Louis thought it was going to be losing its dominance for the gateway to the west. So there's this sudden interest that we need to have railroads. You know, it would help the settlers get west. It would also help us with commerce for the state to get our goods to market quicker. So in 1836, they recommended building 2 railroads, both out of St. Louis. One was to go west to serve primarily the agriculture area north of the Missouri River. The other was to go south out of St. Louis to hit the iron ore rich areas down around Washington and Iron counties and Crawford. And between January and February of 1837, there were 17 railroads were chartered for construction in the state. The first that was chartered was the one to, the St. Louis, Bellevue, and Mineral was the one to build south to the Iron Mountain for the ore deposits. But it would be another 15 years before any railroad construction would start in this state. In 1849, there were actually 4 railroad conventions, but I'm just going to focus on 2 of them. Chicago had one, Missouri, St. Louis, Memphis, and I believe New Orleans was the 4th, all vying to be the transcontinental hopping off point. So, during St. Louis, it was considered to build west out of St. Louis for the Pacific Coast was going to be the best route. The state of Missouri started giving grants and bonds to various railroads. You can see the dollar amounts there. Almost $8.9 million in 1850 dollars. And fortunately for the state later, we're not going to get into the details of finance, but the railroads forfeited on a lot of the bonds. So some of the first railroads chartered in the state was the Hannibal St. Joe in 47, predecessor of the BN, the Q, the Pacific Road in 49, 51 you had the Northern Missouri, came the Wabash, the Iron Mountain south, the Mopac south out of St. Louis. The Canton and Bloomfield, this is one of these railroads, it's hard to find out what it actually did. It did actually become part of the St. Louis and Keokuk at the time, but it was abandoned before the Keokuk went into the Burlington, but I cannot find the date that it was abandoned. So if anybody knows, I'd be interested to learn later.
Were these railroads primarily block gauge?
Yes, Missouri wanted the railroads to be built at a 5'6" gauge because they didn't want Eastern money to influence their railroads, and you know, we'll actually touch on that a little bit. Southwest branch of Missouri, the Pacific Railroad, the Platte, and then the K Road and Fulton of Missouri, which later became the K Road Arkansas and Texas, which was still referred by railroaders as the CAT. That line's completely gone now. That went into the MOP and finally into the UP. That goes through Sykeston.
What canton was the Canton Bloomfield?
Canton, north of Hannibal.
Canton, Missouri.
Yes. Yeah.
Bloomfield, Iowa.
Bloomfield, Iowa. Correct. But yep, here's your answer there about the gauges. State of Missouri wanted to be 5'6" gauge. 4'8" gauge was considered a narrow gauge. You know, that was the eastern stuff. We didn't want to be entangled with them. And besides, you're never going to build a bridge across the Missouri River or Mississippi River. You just can't do it. So why should we have to pick that gauge, that eastern gauge? So in 47, the Hannibal and St. Joe was chartered to build a St. Joe. St. Joseph and Hannibal were the second and third largest cities in the state of Missouri, behind, of course, St. Louis. Kansas City wasn't even really much of a blip at that time. 49, the Pacific Railroad was chartered to build west, and its original target was not Kansas City. It was chartered to build somewhere on the western boundary of the state. In 1851, there was groundbreaking in St. Louis for the Pacific. Later that year, groundbreaking for the Hannibal St. Joe. The Iron Mountain was chartered. It was to build south to Pilot Knob, and then also to build to some point on the Mississippi River south of Cape Girardeau, and they chose Belmont because, as Jim had shown, the Mobile and Ohio was building up from the south. And then the North Missouri Railroad was chartered to go from St. Charles to the Iowa border. And the Canton and Bloomfield was chartered to build from Canton to Bloomfield, Iowa. But then look at those two, the Iron Mountain and the North Missouri, almost similar to the first two that were part of the 1836 convention. They're similar. So in 1852, the Pacific is the first to build and run a train in the state, 5 miles out to Cheltenham. North Missouri extended their charter to build into St. Louis. And then the southwest branch of the Pacific, jumping off point from Franklin to build to the southwest border of the state. If you're at the museum today, you saw the Barrett's Tunnel. That's the west tunnel. The east tunnel lies on the other side of Barrett's Road on private property. It took a little bit over 2 years. This was the bottleneck on the railroad. They had built track out in Uber through Kirkwood and all the way out to Franklin, but they had to finish these tunnels first. The rail line today is in a cut just east of these tunnels. So the Pacific Road 53 reaches Franklin, today known as Pacific. The Platte County Railroad is chartered to build from Weston to St. Joe on the eastern bank of the Missouri River. And the Iron Mountain wants to start building south out of St. Louis, but they run into a snag. The War Department doesn't want them building through the arsenal south of St. Louis here in the city, nor do they want them building through the Jefferson Barracks property further and out in St. Louis County. They were afraid, especially at the arsenal, that the steam engines, sparks from the steam engines would ignite their powder and that. So they were wanting the railroad originally to haul their cars through the government property with horses. We actually have letters in our archives. Who was the War Department? I can't remember. Drawing a blank. Who was the heart? Davis. Thank you, Jefferson Davis. We actually have letters from him saying, "No, let them build." Not in those words, but you'll get the gist of it. So 1854, the Cairo and Fulton of Missouri, two different railroads, not the Cairo and Fulton of Arkansas, chartered to build from Bird's Point, opposite of Cairo, to the Missouri-Arkansas line. The North Missouri completes its line from St. Charles to Warrenton. Pacific reaches Jeff City. November 1st, they run an inaugural train with a lot of invited guests and dignitaries of the state. Heavy rains slow their progress, and they have a hastily built bridge at Gasconade, but they feel it's safe for them to cross because a heavy train covered it the day before, and it didn't. So there were 31 deaths, 136 injuries in this derailment. The eastern approach gave way after the train was pretty much out on it. One car remained upright on the tracks. The conductor had to walk all the way back to Hannibal. There was actually a train following. He started walking, I'm sorry, not Hannibal, Herman. He started walking back east to Herman, caught the other train. They came up and started taking some of the survivors back for medical care. Then in 1856, the impossible happens. Somebody builds a railroad bridge over the Mississippi River. Maybe that 5'6" gauge was a bad choice. So this was the Rock Island Bridge, nothing to do with Missouri, but I just threw it in there because the river got bridged. 57, the Hannibal St. Joe builds west and east at the same time, completing some additional mileage. The Iron Mountain completes itself down to DeSoto. Quincy and Palmyra is formed, and it builds its railroad from West Quincy to meet up with the Hannibal and St. Joe at Palmyra. And then the Osage Valley in southern Kansas gets chartered to build from a point somewhere on the Pacific Railroad near Timpton to Emporia, Kansas. and the Boonville County to build from Centralia down to the city of Columbia. The St. Louis and Keokuk Railroad is chartered to build from Hannibal to St. Louis. This is not the K line that we think of with Burlington here in the state. This is what later became the Hannibal and St. Joe, or I'm sorry, the Hannibal and St. Louis. Alexandria and Bloomfield Railroad, also Bloomfield, Iowa, is chartered to build up there almost parallel to the Canton and Bloomfield. The Canton and Bloomfield gets reorganized as the Mississippi River Airline with a hyphen in it. Those are tricky also. You'll see airline with the airline without the hyphen. It's just like railroad, 2 words, 1 word. So 1857, Kansas City is feeling left out because there's all this railroad progress going on all around it and nobody's coming to them. So they have some boosters in town and they decide we're going to charter our own and organize our own railroad. So they have this grandiose design to build this railroad called the Kansas City, Galveston, and Lake Superior. It was going to be a north-south railroad.
A little bit of territory.
Yep. That would have been an impressive road at one time, I guess. In modern day, it would be CPKCS, maybe? I don't know.
Galveston was the top port in the United States.
And Galveston had railroads at that time, so that's why they were wanting to go to Galveston. It's a seaport, and it had transportation. So the Pacific reaches Tipton. Tipton was the terminus of the Butterfield Overland Mail Stage. So now you could ride the train to Tipton, and you could get on the Butterfield, and you could head west. North Missouri makes it up to Moberly. Quincy and Palmyra completes and is immediately leased to the Hannibal and St. Joe. The Iron Mountain finally makes it down to Pilot Knob and builds a branch out to Potosi in the Iron Mountain, in the iron ore area. And the Osage Valley is modified to build north to Boonville. There's suddenly a lot of towns on the river that are feeling that they're being left out, just like Kansas City, and they're anxious to build rail lines to meet the other rail lines, so they're not left out in the cold. They're seeing the winds of change. And then the Platte County starts its construction between St. Joe and Weston to Winthrop. Winthrop is, think of it as East Atchison. Charlton and Randolph is chartered up there to build west. Hannibal and Joe does some more completion. And the Cairo and Fulton down there completes itself over to Charleston, about 12 miles or so from Bird's Point west. And then, of course, the Hannibal St. Joe is the first to complete a rail line across the state. In February of '59. Oh, look at that. We got a typo up there. See? 100 years from now, someone's going to find this slide somewhere on the internet, and they're going to have that date, and they're going to try to validate it. So it's, it should be 1859. The Hannibal and St. Joe is completed. It's going to confuse him because up here it says that, but anyway. So yep, the Hannibal and St. Joe is the first one to complete a line across the state. North Missouri reaches Macon, and they start advertising through passenger service to St. Joseph because they're interchanging cars with the Hannibal and St. Joe. So Lexington on the Missouri River is feeling left out. They chartered to build a rail line to meet up with the Pacific Road in and around Sedalia. Louisiana-Missouri River is chartered to connect Louisiana with Jefferson City, or the north shore of the Missouri River across from Jefferson City. There were plans to build a bridge into Jeff City from the north side, but nothing ever came of it. And then Cape Girardeau is feeling left out because, the Iron Mountain is grading west of them. And so they charter the Pilot Knob, Cape Girardeau, and Belmont so that they're not left out in the cold. So everybody wants to be in the railroad business now. And the Pacific Railroad finally designates Kansas City as its western terminus.
All these the same gauge?
From what the best I can tell, I know the Pacific and the Iron Mountain were 5'6". The Cairo and Fulton down there in the Boot Heel was 5'6", as was the Southwest Branch. I found references to the North Missouri being a 5'6", but I can never find a reference as to when it was standard gauged. And I honestly don't know if the Hannibal St. Joe was 5'6", or if it actually built as 4'8½". I don't know. I'd be interested in learning.
Do you happen to know the rationale, the thinking behind this Platte County Railroad? It looks like it's basically paralleling the river. Do you?
No, I don't know why that was being built, other than to compete with riverboat traffic. But that's also why the Pacific didn't want to originally go to Kansas City, because they did not want their terminus to be in a city where they were going to have to compete with boats, because river traffic had been there. It's already established. They wanted to go inland. And I'll have another presentation in a few years of the actual, how they decided to build the Pacific route, the route across the state, because that's another whole story. There are 4 lines surveyed. Anyway, so let's jump ahead to 1860. Southwest Branch is continuing to build. It's getting down to Dillon. Platte County Railroad completes the line all the way to St. Joe to Winthrop, so they're running trains now between St. Joe and East Atchison. And the Kansas City Galveston starts grading their line to go connect with the Hannibal and St. Joe at Cameron. And then another new road is formed, and it's basically duplicating the charter of a previous railroad. So why? I don't know. And then the Tebow Neosho gets chartered to build from Sedalia to Nevada, or Nevada, however you want to pronounce it. Which, So we'll just kind of pause here. 1860, Hannibal and St. Joe's got 200 miles. Whoops. That dental will go the way I want it to go. Oh well. You can see there. That's how the railroad systems looked in 1860. Those are the completed trackages. 61, we reach Sedalia on the Pacific Railroad. Southwest gets down to Rolla. Platte County Road completes from Winthrop to Weston. Then something happens in April. Yeah. So the next 5 years, there's very little progress of railroads in Missouri. No railroad in Missouri that I can find was free from being torn up. Bridges burned. It's just a bad time in the state. Grant makes an appearance here. One of his first assignments as a colonel is to protect the Hannibal and St. Joe and the mail that was going west on that route to feed the Pony Express. And then, of course, they had their tragedy at the Platte River east of St. Joe, 1861. Their bridge was burned, train got on it, train derailed, killing 20 and injuring another 100. Then 1862, another little thing happens called the Pacific Railway Act. And it wants to build a railroad to the Pacific for the government to use for postal, military, and other purposes. That there basically ended all thoughts of the Pacific Railroad of becoming the transcontinental railroad. This is what sets up the Union Pacific to build west out of Omaha.
Also sets up the Northern Pacific.
Did it? Okay.
Yes. Same legislation.
Okay. I didn't read the whole thing. I just found little snippets.
What did he say?
It also set up the Northern Pacific in that same legislation. Okay. Hannibal St. Joe apparently is credited also for the first RPO. They built this in their shops at Hannibal, and that's what was carrying the mail to feed from the western connection or the eastern connections out to the Pony Express. It's 1863 that Platte County Railroad gets reorganized as the Platte Country Railroad. It was financial dealings, and I'm not going to bore you with all that, but that's what happened there. Not much happened in 63. 64, the railroad is chartered to build between Brunswick and Chillicothe out on the middle of the state, northern. The Pacific Railroad decides it's going to ship rail up the river and start building east out of Kansas City because they're just really not making much progress other than grading. And then the Platte Country Road defaults, and the state splits it into two different railroads, Atchison and St. Joe and the Weston and Atchison Railroad. 1865, Pacific is completed. The next day they start running trains. Look at that. You could go from Kansas City to St. Louis in just about, what, 14 hours? Which...
I've got a picture of a bridge that the concrete's still there, but all the metal's gone in Greenwood, Missouri. And has a date on there, 1865.
Really? Okay.
And
That's around Greenwood? Okay.
That's Greenwood, which is now the Union Pacific.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. The Southwest Branch is reorganized. You know, basically Pacific Road was stealing, they were moving money that was destined for the Southwest Branch to their line to complete it, and defaulted on the bonds for the Southwest Branch, and therefore the Southwest Branch was reorganized as the Southwest Pacific Railroad. And the Missouri and Mississippi Railroad is going to build from Salisbury to Glasgow. Glasgow is on the Missouri River, and they're also one of these towns that says, hey, we're being left out by the rail boom. We want to connect to the railroad. So we're not sure which road they're going to connect with because there's two railroads chartered to build west out of Macon. Or Moberly, I'm sorry, it's Moberly there. Then the Alexandria, Canton, and LaGrange and West Quincy is chartered to build from Alexandria to West Quincy. Southwest Branch is reorganized yet again as the Southwest Pacific Railroad. And Kansas City, Galveston, and Lake Superior figures they bit off more than they can chew, and they just decided to become the Kansas City and Cameron. And after the war ends, the North Missouri gets the charter for those two other railroads building west out of Moberly and keeps the one and basically jettisons the other one and then extends that to build their west branch to Kansas City. Because now everybody is wanting to look at Kansas City as a destination. If the Pacific's going there and the Camerons going there, we should all go there. So Alexandria and Bloomfield's renamed the Alexander Nebraska City Railroad. 67, they build west of Brunswick on the North Missouri. And Missouri Valley is going to consolidate a railroad now of the before split Platte County Country Railroad. And then they're also authorized to build north to the Iowa line. And the St. Joseph and Council Bluffs is incorporated to build from St. Joe up to the Iowa line. Southwest Pacific is continuing to construct a little bit, and they're purchased by the Atlantic and Pacific Railroad. And the Hannibal and Central Missouri is incorporated to build from Hannibal to Moberly. The Boone County and Booneville complete, so that's the Wabash line from Centralia to Columbia. Today it's the Colt, the Columbia Terminal. City of Missouri forecloses there on the Iron Mountain. The current president of the Pacific Road says, let's go buy that. So he buys that and the Cairo and Fulton of Missouri. That sets up the, basically the Missouri Pacific. And then something happens. Some people in St. Louis get this idea, let's build a bridge here. So Kansas City and Cameron's complete in 1868. Southwest Pacific is reorganized yet again as the South Pacific Railroad. They're having a hard time. North Missouri completes their line up to Kirksville and gets almost to Kansas City. They end at Birmingham. And the St. Louis and Chillicothe and Omaha Road is organized to build from Chillicothe northwest. So you see railroads starting to want to go towards Kansas City, and you see all these railroads are now wanting to build northwesterly because they want to connect now with the Union Pacific at Council Bluffs, because it's the Transcon. St. Joseph. So this date confuses me because it was only chartered like a year or two prior. How could they build that railroad that fast? So I don't know if these dates are really accurate. You know, was that a grading date was completed, or did they actually start operating the railroad at that time? It just says it completes the line. And I haven't dug any of the Poor's manuals to find out. I think 1868 are the first Poor's manuals. The Missouri Valley completes its line. The Quincy Bridge is built. This now gives a connection from the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy coming out of Chicago to cross into Missouri and start handing traffic off to the Hannibal and St. Joe. The Iron Mountain completes its line from Bismarck down to Belmont. North Missouri completes its line up to Iowa. Chicago Southwestern Road is incorporated, comes from Platte to the Missouri-Iowa line. That will be in the future of the Rock Island. Quincy, Missouri and Pacific Railroad is incorporated to build west from Quincy to the Missouri-Iowa border. Tebow and Neosho grades from Sedalia to Moberly. The St. Louis and Santa Fe builds east out of Kansas City towards Holden to connect with the Pacific Railroad. Missouri Valley completes its line. Pilot Knob and Cape Girardeau and Belmont give up the ghost and basically recharter as the Cape Girardeau and State Line Railroad, and they start surveying a line southwesterly out of Cape, heading towards Poplar Bluff. And the Hannibal Bridge is built across the Missouri River at Kansas City. And then the Pacific Railroad changes its gauge from 5'6" to 4'8.5" because it knows the Eads Bridge is coming and change is in the future. So the Hannibal Bridge opens in 1869 at Kansas City. It's the first bridge across the Missouri River, first railroad bridge across the Missouri River. Kansas City and Cameron gets leased to the Hannibal and St. Joe. Chillicothe and Brunswick completes its line. Atlantic and Pacific completes all the way down to Pierce City, just past Springfield. And St. Louis and St. Joseph completes its line from Lexington, north bank of the river, across from Lexington to St. Joe. That later becomes a Santa Fe line, I believe, at some point. And then later reverts back to Wabash in the end. And the Kansas City, St. Joseph, and Council Bluffs is incorporated, and it's just a consolidation of the Missouri Valley and the St. Joe and Council Bluffs. So now you've got like one contiguous line from just north of Kansas City up to the Missouri-Iowa border along the river. That'll later become the Q. 1870, Chillicothe and Omaha is consolidated to build from Chillicothe up towards Council Bluffs. Alexandria, Nebraska is consolidated as the Missouri-Iowa-Nebraska Railway. The Alexandria, Canton, LaGrange, and the West Quincy is consolidated with the Mississippi, Missouri, and the River Air Line. Clarksville and Western is incorporated to build from Louisiana to St. Louis. Louisiana and Missouri River completes its line from Louisiana to Mexico. That's the beginnings of the Alton Railroad in Missouri. And the A&P completes its line down to Neosho. And then a new railroad appears. St. Louis, Salem, and Little Rock. It's incorporated and starts surveying. It wants to go to Little Rock. And the Tebow and Neosho completes their line from Sedalia to Moberly. Chicago and Southwestern completes their line to Stillings Junction, just outside of Platte City, across from Lexington, or Leavenworth, across from Leavenworth. 1871, the St. Louis Council Bluffs completes its line to Plattsburgh. So it's building its way up towards Council Bluffs. Quincy, Missouri and Pacific Road completes its line over to Novinger, just west of Kirksville. St. Louis and Keokuk changes its name to St. Louis Hannibal Keokuk and completes its line south to Bowling Green. And the St. Louis and Santa Fe builds its line and completes it between Holden and Kansas. I think that actually went west into Lawrence, Kansas, I believe. But I'm just focused on Missouri here. And the Lexington and St. Louis and completed and immediately leased to Pacific Railroad. Then the Jefferson City, Lebanon, and Southwestern Roads incorporated to build Jeff City to Lebanon. The Linneus, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, the Linneus branch of the Burlington and Southwest Railroad starts building their line from the Missouri border down to Laclede. Missouri, Iowa, and Nebraska completes its line between Alexandria and Memphis up in the eastern corner of the state. So not Memphis as in Memphis, Tennessee, but Memphis as in Memphis, Missouri, up there in the northeast. And then there's another consolidation of the Mississippi Valley and Western and the Mississippi and Missouri River Air Line. And they also build a line from West Quincy to Hannibal. And then the North Missouri finally builds their bridge at St. Charles, replacing a car ferry service that they had in place. They completed in 1871, and then shortly after that they actually went into bankruptcy. 1872, the Pacific builds a branch line east out of Kirkwood, it's called the Carondelet Branch, and it goes to Ivory, where there was a car float going over to the Illinois railroads. And the Atlantic and Pacific starts leasing the Pacific Railroad. And the Louisiana and Missouri River completes their line down to Cedar City, and it's on the north bank of the Missouri across from Jeff City. And then Memphis, Carthage, and Northwestern is incorporated, and it starts building from Pierce to Carthage. And then the North Missouri Railroad gets reorganized as St. Louis, Kansas City, and Northern Railway Company, and they complete their line from Birmingham to Harlem, which is North Kansas City. The Cairo and Fulton down there is reorganized as the Cairo, Arkansas, and Texas Railroad. And the Iron Mountain reaches Poplar Bluff and the Missouri-Arkansas border. And this was confusing to me too, because the Cairo and Fulton, Missouri was chartered to build from Bird's Point to the Missouri border, and then the Iron Mountain did their line. So I don't know if if one took the other ones right away or what they did down there. I don't know that. Hannibal in central Missouri completes their line from Hannibal west to Moberly and is leased to the Toledo, Wabash, and Western. Then later they both operate that in conjunction with the Katy. Later they give that line up and it's a Katy line only, because the Katy has eyes on building to Chicago. St. Louis is not the destination for the future Katy Railroad. And the Wyandotte, Kansas City, and Northwestern's incorporated to build a 3-foot gauge from Kansas City east to Lexington. The Linneus branch does some more completion of their trackage. Missouri, Iowa, and Nebraska completes their line up to from Luray up to the border. Mississippi Valley and Western completes their line. And then a bridge is built at Leavenworth. There's also railroad construction occurring in Kansas at this time. So they're wanting to link their stuff with the railroads building on the east side of the river, so they build a bridge there. And then the Toledo, Wabash, and Western completes their line, or their bridge at Hannibal. And they start running through trains all the way to Moberly. That line between Moberly and Hannibal was jointly ran, as far as I can tell, from the Katy and the Toledo, Wabash, and Western. Later became fully a Katy property, and then I forget the date, it reverted then to a Wabash line and is still in use today at Norfolk Southern. 1873, the the cap, the Carroll, Arkansas, and Texas completes Poplar Bluff. St. Louis, Salem, and Little Rock completes down to Cuba and Salem. There's also iron in that area. The railroad never gets any further in there. Missouri-Mississippi River is renamed the Keokuk, Kansas City, and builds from Salisbury to Glasgow up there in the center of the state. Mississippi Valley is consolidated yet again with the Clarksville and Western Railroad. That's setting up the St. Louis and Keokuk, the K line. The Alton completes their bridge at Louisiana, and they start running through trains on the Louisiana and Missouri was basically their construction road in the state of Missouri. 1874, the Iron Mountain is in the Cairo in Arkansas and Texas is reorganized into the St. Louis Iron Mountain and Southern Railway. Mississippi Valley and Western completes their line from West Quincy to Hannibal. Wyandotte, Kansas City gets their 3-foot gauge railroad all the way to Independence. And then that railroad down there, I can't find the date when it changed its name from the Cape Girardeau and State Line Railroad to the Illinois, Missouri, and Texas. I cannot find of when they changed it, but there's a record now of the Illinois, Missouri, and Texas building west out of Cape Girardeau. Eads Bridge comes into being in 1874. It's open for transport. The bus tour on Thursday. Was that yesterday? Yeah, Thursday. We crossed that bridge going over to Metro East. You saw it today. We went under it on the east side. Katy builds their bridge at Boonville, so they can start running trains. And of course, the first train robbery. I also find references to the first train robbery as being on the North Missouri, somewhere up around Moberly, of a gold shipment being stolen. It was being transferred from, it was like a military gold shipment that got stolen. But I can't find a second source corroborating that. But I can find several sources about this. Although sometimes they get the times wrong, they get the number of gang members wrong, or at least they don't match each other. So the Linnaeus branch is completed. St. Louis, Keokuk, and Northwestern Railroad is incorporated, and it purchases the Mississippi Valley and Western Railroad. That's setting up the K line for the Q. Did it stop working?
Batteries are running low.
Batteries are low. Oh, well, okay. So hit enter. When you hear the ding, advance the film strip. So yeah, just if you can click for me. Yes, sir.
When did reporting marks start? I'm just thinking of how neat it would be to try to build a reporting mark for all these things.
Yeah, I don't know. And like you saw on Jim's one slide where he had, where the railroad started and how the names changed. And I've got lots of scribbling at home and spreadsheets where I've tried to track the same things. But I don't really know when reporting marks started on rail cars. Swap that out real quick. We're almost done. We're almost to 1876. Thank you, Dave. Did it work? Technology is wonderful, isn't it? Okay, 1875, they built a swing bridge at Atchison. I can't find any photos of the original. All I can find are these. There's a website out there on bridge history, and I can find this sketch that somebody did. So you'll just have to try to imagine what the bridge really looked like. Burlington and Southwestern completes their line. The A&P is having problems, so they have to sell the Pacific Railroad. And at that time, it's reorganized as the Missouri Pacific Railway Company. And of course, they have to jettison their Missouri division, and it gets reincorporated as the St. Louis and San Francisco Railway. Yep, Frisco. And Wyandotte, Kansas City completes their 3-foot gauge from Independence on over towards Lexington. And the K line completes from Hannibal to Louisiana. So that's basically it. By 1877, according to Poor's manuals, there's the mileage for all the various railroads in the state of Missouri. And if you want to think of it in modern terms, not modern like BNSF and UP, but 50s, 60s, 70s, the stuff we all know and love, those are the railroads that those all became. You can see the Missouri Pacific, was the Iron Mountain, the Cat, and the Pacific Road, the Lexington, the Wyandotte, the Boonville branch. You got the Alton coming in. You got what will future be Wabash, Norfolk and Western. They'll eventually extend their line all the way up to Council Bluffs. And in red is everything that went into the Burlington system, the Frisco, and the Rock Island up there. And you look at this map and it's like, okay, what's missing? Of course, we don't have the Rock Island across the state. It didn't build until 1900. And there's a pretty big giant missing right now. They're pretty famous for a Transcon railroad. They're nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
They haven't built yet in Missouri at this time.
That's it.
So there's just a recap of all the bridges that got built in 25 years. So you look at what in 25 years, that's pretty remarkable how much they got accomplished. And of all those bridges, there's only one still standing. The Eads. Wow. All the others have been replaced or rebuilt, or have parallel lines built next to them, and the old bridge is taken down. The only one still standing is the Eads.
Well, the Wabash and Hannibal, the only thing that's been replaced is the swing.
Is it? Is that the only part?
Yeah.
Okay. Not the trusses were never rebuilt or anything?
Nothing I know.
Okay.
The swing and the first truss were replaced because the swing was wider than the lift, and so an extra truss or something was built to fill that, I think, or
Okay.
somehow. But the rest of them, I won't believe it.
Because the two photos I had for that bridge, or which one? We're talking about the bridge at Hannibal, Missouri, right?
Hannibal, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I didn't know that. I thought the whole bridge had been replaced at one time with new trusses. But no, that's good to know. No, because this just helps me get things better next time when I do a presentation. I can go back and update this.
And the lift came from the somewhere on the Tennessee Valley water system.
Okay.
And I don't know which railroad. Do you, Larry?
No, I know it was done in December of '93, I think.
Okay, so
If I remember my date right, it was December of some year. Seems like it was '93 they did it. But
okay. Yes, sir.
One railroad didn't have on with lead and Fort Scott. And the road red was built in Lebanon, Missouri, Fort Scott. After the southwestern region wall, but the track is going to lay. And then the MKD went on that road bed and laid in Fort Scott.
Okay. Okay.
I think it was 71, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I actually skipped. There's a lot of railroads that were organized, incorporated, that planned to build somewhere. Because if you go back and look at those maps, I mean, there's all these hashed lines. Those are railroads that are thinking about building, but I focused here on only the railroads that actually did something and had done something by 1876. I just wanted to cut it off at some point. Did that build after 1876 or prior?
Prior. And
Really?
the road bed, and those counties had to pay for those bonds
Okay.
through the years.
Okay, I'll have to check into that and correct my stuff and update it. Okay. But that's all I've got on it. Yes, sir.
Hey, that's
We're not done yet. We got a question. Yes, sir.
I Googled your question, when did U.S. Railroad start interchanging freight cars? And the first response that came up said 1870.
Okay.
But that applies to Missouri and your situation that are built, but that might give you an idea of when
Okay.
it started.
Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay. So that's all I've got. So we're at the end of the program now.
Okay,
So next up, whoever.
you know why I'm here?
To say hi?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
But before I present this plaque to you for your presentation, we have to get a few things straight. First off, hey Don,
Yeah.
what was the name of the railroad you just mentioned that never got built? All right, well, at Buffalo, Missouri, there's a BN caboose that's sitting on the roadbed.
That's right.
Part of their museum or whatever up there.
Yeah, and those counties all were mad because they had to pay for them bonds.
Some of those problems happened at different places across. Roadbed got graded and then nothing happened after that.
Yeah.
One in Arkansas, I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, I'm from Southwest Missouri. I grew up in Carthage. And we played football or all kinds of sports against Nevada. The city in Missouri is Nevada.
And I'm sure in the next 12 months I will learn how to pronounce
It's Palestine, Texas. And then one more you got wrong.
Okay.
It's Lebanon, Missouri.
Not Lebanon, okay.
Not Lebanon. That's a country over there where they got too much sand. It's Lebanon, my friend. Okay, there'll be a test.
Is it Arkansas? No.
Good presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.